Welcome to this short video introduction to ImpactOSS. My name's Ash. I'm one of the founding trustees of the ImpactOSS Trust, which is a trust established to help anyone that's interested in this software to learn more and to install it if they're interested. So I hope you find this useful, and if you have any questions following it, please drop me a line and I'll be happy to either schedule a call or answer it via email. Okay, so let's get started. So this is the opening screen to ImpactOSS, the demo site. This is the open source tool that can be customized for any country that wants to use it. Primarily, it's designed for national mechanisms for implementation, reporting and follow-up, but it can also be used by national human rights institutions as well. And we'll see an example of both of those at the end of this video. Okay, so if we click to enter the site, the first thing that the user sees is an overview of the tool. So they get to see the implementation plan, which is at the very heart of the software. And what leads into the implementation plan is all their human rights recommendations. And in this example, we have a very lucky state who only has 66 recommendations at the moment, whereas we know in reality that every country has many more than that. And then we also have the Sustainable Development Goal targets as well. So they feed in to this overall implementation plan, which currently has 54 government actions measured by 246 indicators. Now, don't get too tied up in the actual numbers, because these are all just demonstration numbers, of course. As we go through this, the introduction, just bear in mind that there's two primary users for this tool. There's people, the public, who want to come and explore recommendations and what the state's doing to implement their human rights obligations and the Sustainable Development Goals. And then there's the state itself, which wants to use this tool to help plan and monitor its implementation. And I'll try to highlight the differences as we go along. So this introduction screen gives the user a brief overview. They can also click on any of the category groups down the side to have a look at things in a bit more detail. So if they wanted to look at the Sustainable Development Goals, it would give you a breakdown of the targets and how many actions we currently have next to each of the targets. Similarly, if we click on human rights bodies, at the moment we have recommendations that have come from the Committee on the Rights of the Child and the UPR. And for the UPR, you can see how many have been accepted and how many have been noted. You can also see organisations. So in terms of the implementing actions, which ministries are doing the most work. So it can be used as a competitive advocacy tool as well. So this is the overview tab, the first tab that users come to when they enter the site. Now, the main element to highlight first, the main functionality, is the recommendations tab. So if we click on that, this is the database of all the recommendations for this demo state that we're considering, and they have 66 recommendations. So it's very basic. ImpactOSS can be just that. It can be a resource for the public, for civil society, on all of the human rights recommendations and the SDGs that a particular country has. Now, one of the things I've come across a lot in my work is civil society organisations saying, we saw the UPR recommendations when they were first made, following the review, and then we didn't really see them again until 6 months, 3 months before the next review in 4.5, 5 years' time. So it's very base level. ImpactOSS is trying to address that problem. It's trying to provide a permanent platform where people can engage with the recommendations and human rights obligations, which is, it's a really basic prerequisite for effective implementation. So that's the public side of things. So anyone, civil society, public, can come on here and they can filter by whatever area of interest they have. So if they put in the keyword health, it would show all of the recommendations that have the word health in. So there's the keyword search at the top that they can use to drill down into these recommendations, or they can use any of these categories down the side as well. So if they were interested in a particular group of people, they could scroll down here and say, okay, well, I'm interested in migrants. And they know there's going to be 5 recommendations come back in that search. If they tick that, it comes back as 5 recommendations relating to migrants. But this all has a far more practical use for the states that are using this tool. So when they receive their sets of recommendations, or for the first time that they're using ImpactOSS, they have all of these 66 recommendations, or in reality many, many more. And the first thing that they want to do is cluster them to make them more manageable. And this is the first part of developing the implementation plan. So what ImpactOSS does is it has a couple of different ways in which it helps the user, the state, ideally the national mechanism for implementation, reporting and follow-up, to start to cluster these recommendations. And again, we can do it using the filtering or keyword searching that we were just looking at before. So we could pick, for instance, affected persons, migrants, and we could see if there's a particular cluster that we wanted to create out of that. Another easy example would be, well, we want to cluster all of the ratification recommendations related to the Convention Against Torture. So if I put the word ratify in there, it brings up all of the recommendations that say ratifying them. Straight away I can see, well, we've got two that talk about ratifying CAT here. So maybe I want to create a cluster that says ratify the Convention Against Torture. So all I do is I click on the two that I would like, click on thematic clusters. If the thematic cluster already exists, I can just select that cluster as well. Or if the cluster doesn't exist, I just add a new one at the bottom and then enter that cluster details there, and then click update, and that's made my cluster. So what that allows the state to do is to go through all of its recommendations and turn them from 66 into a much smaller set of clusters. And they can, at any point, they can figure out quite easily how many recommendations haven't been clustered yet, because all they do is when they're back at the recommendations base screen, click on thematic cluster, and you can filter without thematic cluster. So here so far, we've already clustered 52 of them, and we've only got 14 left. So we can select all those without a thematic cluster, and then we can start to look at how we can cluster those more. So that's the first step of building the implementation plan. The next step is to add actions. What are we going to do for these particular clusters? So using, again, our example of CAT ratification, we want to add some actions to them. All we do is we simply click add action. We can enter the title, any description we want, if there's a date by when it's supposed to be due, and then whenever we add an action, this is where some of the added value of the tool comes in terms of reducing the duplication, is we can link it to multiple recommendations in one go. So if we've got an action that links to maybe all of the recommendations in that cluster that we just created, we can link this action directly to all of them. Now, we don't even have to go through the whole list of recommendations to find them. What we can do is we can just click on thematic cluster, select CAT ratification, and it'll bring up all of those, and we can either select them all or we can select 2 out of the 3, because sometimes there's an implementing action that doesn't directly apply to all recommendations within a particular cluster. So we have that flexibility to either select all or a selection of them. And what this means is that when we track this particular action, and whenever any information is uploaded against it, it will track against all of these different recommendations. Now, these are all UPR ones, but we can also do it against CRC, against CEDAW, special procedures. So if we uploaded one document, it would track it against every single recommendation emanating from all of the different human rights mechanisms, in the process eliminating a lot of duplication in terms of data collection. But what we can also do is link it to the SDG targets as well. So once we have our action, again, we can filter by keyword or by a sustainable development goal, and all we do is just select which ones we want to link it to. And again, whenever information is uploaded against this particular action, it will track it against the recommendations, and it will track it against the SDGs as well. And we can select different tags as well, so we can select which ministry is doing the action. In one of the configurations is we can show whether actions are smart as well. I mean, this is one of the optional features. And we can also show whether it's in progress or completed. So we start to build up our action plan like that. So once so our implementation plan. So what we end up with is a series of clusters of recommendation. So here we have CAP ratification, and if we clicked on this, it would show us our cluster in more detail. That we've got 3 actions addressing this cluster of recommendations, and it shows you all the recommendations in detail there as well. So that's one of the clusters that makes up our implementation plan. And if you scroll down, you can see all the other clusters of recommendations too, just working in exactly the same way. So what you have is a very simple, very easy to understand implementation plan. So you've taken hundreds of recommendations, you've clustered them, and then you've started to add actions that address multiple recommendations and the SDGs in one go. And what you can do at any one point is you can go back to the recommendations tab, and similarly, like we did with looking at which ones hadn't been clustered, we can also quite easily see which ones don't have actions associated with them. So rather than getting to the end of a reporting period and realizing there's been recommendations that haven't had any actions associated with them or any work done on implementation, at the outset, we can quite easily, with the click of a button, just identify which recommendations don't yet have any actions ascribed to them and take corrective action. So a couple of other things to note in terms of the actions. With each action, you can and should establish an indicator, at least one indicator for each action. We can expand these columns to see in more detail. And for each of the indicators, you can set automated email reminders that go out directly to people across ministries. They can either go to focal points or individual officers, and you can set when they're due. And if that person doesn't upload the information at the prescribed time, then an overall manager can be allocated to a set of recommendations, and they would then receive an automated email reminder after a week or two of non-action to say Ash hasn't uploaded his information about the initial report to the CAT committee like he said he would have done by the 19th of February 2019. And they can either get in touch with me or they can get in touch with my manager if I've moved on. So we're trying to address staff turnover as well. Or if that still doesn't happen, if the information still isn't entered, then it can be escalated to the national mechanism for the next meeting. And what this tool does is it allows the national mechanism or anybody that's using this to quickly scroll down the implementation plan and see all of the information. So you can click on any of these and it will take you directly to the actual information. So it's an information resource in itself, but it will also show you where information is overdue. So if a national mechanism meets on a regular basis, it can very easily and visually see what information is missing and take the corrective action. So what ImpactOSS does, and in conjunction with the national mechanism, is it tries to introduce all these safeguards into non-entry of data. It tries to address lots of the challenges that are faced by all of the countries in terms of staff turnover, in terms of managing multiple recommendations across ministries, in terms of coordinating all of the work, and put all of this into a simple, easy to use tool. So when it comes to the time at which a report is due, the UPR report is due or a CRC report is due, all you do is you go to whichever human rights body you're due to report to, in this case the Universal Periodic Review, and we select that, and it filters the whole implementation plan by that set of recommendations. So it's just showing you all of the implementation work that's been done relating to the UPR recommendations, grouped under the thematic clusters that you've set for yourself. Now, what we've done with thematic clusters in Samoa and other countries is we've primarily used the headings from the Universal Human Rights Index, and then some bespoke ones as well that are relevant to the particular context. So we've tried to align it as closely as possible to UN standards, but also to have that flexibility to allow for national context as well. So just one or two other features which I haven't mentioned yet. So when it comes to adding recommendations and actions or indicators, there's two ways to do it. We can either do it singularly by clicking on this button at the top, which is add recommendation, and you get a simple form to fill in like this, or we can do it in batch as well. So if you click on import, you'll come to this screen and you'll be able to download a CSV template, which is just like an Excel sheet, and you can copy and paste all of your recommendations into there and then select the file and just upload them in bulk. So it saves a great deal of time. And what we're also looking to do is create the functionality where you can automatically import them from the Universal Human Rights Index as well. And we're currently, that would be one of our next phases of development when we get another partner on board to fund that development. But the only caveat that I would say at this point is that it can often take a number of months for a set of recommendations to be uploaded to the Universal Human Rights Index, and in any given implementation period of 4 or 5 years, 6 months is a substantial amount of time. So I would always advise considering doing it using the batch import functionality that ImpactOSS already has. So that's a brief overview of some of the main functionality, I think. A couple of other things to mention are that ImpactOSS has different configurations, different looks. It's very flexible in its use. I mean, it was built with flexibility in mind because there's an awareness amongst all of the trustees of the ImpactOSS Trust that different countries have different needs, although there's a lot of common features to the barriers and hurdles that are faced. So we've tried to build in this degree of flexibility at all stages in terms of how it works, how it looks, how states can use it. So a couple of ways in which that can be demonstrated is, first of all, I showed previously how actions can be linked to the SDG targets. So you can identify the crossover very easily and eliminate any duplication of reporting when it comes to implementing actions that cover both human rights and the SDGs. Now, it's not just human rights obligations and the SDGs that overlap, it's national development plans, other strategic plans, environmental treaties. The information architecture of ImpactOSS is such that additional layers can be added on with a little bit of development. So if a state wanted to include their national development strategy as an extra layer to this, that would be completely feasible as well with a little bit of work. Similarly, the ImpactOSS is customizable in terms of its look and different configurations. So here is an example from Samoa. This is what Samoa's one looks like. You can see similarities, but you can see it's very much been adapted to the Samoan context. Again, you can see the similarities, but there's different configurations. So one of the elements in Samoa is that you can see you can mark actions as ongoing or complete. So you can filter your implementation plan by what's already been done and what's still to come, which is a nice useful little feature. In New Zealand, we've got the New Zealand's National Plan of Action, which is for UPR recommendations, and it's managed by the National Human Rights Commission of New Zealand. And again, you can see the similarities. A good example of how configuration can be suited to meet country needs is they've called there's a plan of action, which seems to make a lot of sense. It's something that we should probably do with Samoa as well. But there's different configurations to suit different needs, and that's what the trust is here to help you do as well. So I think that's a reasonably comprehensive look at the tool so far, and maybe hopefully a brief introduction to it. If you do have any further questions or would like to have a chat, then please do get in touch, because that's what we're here for. That's what the trust is here for. We have a range of manuals for users and for developers. We've tried to develop all the materials a state would need to use this tool. completely without any external assistance, and all you would need to facilitate is the hosting. But if countries do need assistance in the configuration, in the installation, any customization or any training, this is what our trust is here for. We have a range of services that we offer at well below market rate, because we're a charitable trust, and we're here just to meet your needs. But we would always advise you to on how to meet what you need at the lowest possible cost, and hopefully in many circumstances that wouldn't require our assistance. But yeah, so drop us a line if we can help, and I hope you found this useful. Thanks very much. Cheers.